The presentation is going to be very interactive because I'm not going to go the route of the statistical consultant. We are talking about data collection, and I do know that we do not have statisticians by way of profession in our midst. So we're going to actually talk about what we do, how do we do it, and what are those challenges and tips that we could encounter. How do we navigate this when we encounter such? Okay, so the topic, just as you can see, tips and challenges. But permit me, I'm going to start with challenges, then the tips on how we do it. So this is actually an overview of what quantitative data collection is, because we're talking about tips and challenges in quantitative data collection. So we are talking about basically figures and numbers when you refer to quantitative research or quantitative design. You are talking about just figures and numbers, basically. And if you look at the various aspects of projects that have been completed in the university, go through maybe research publications, the library catalog, you will see that there are various types. But I've basically grouped these type into just two basic components, the experimental and non-experimental research. And I do know early this year, there was a presentation, actually, Dr. Sibanda gave a presentation on that, the experimental research, and I did on non-experimental research. So you may still look out for that, consult with the presenters, or even see the slides that are available. So we have these two types, and under these two major categories, there are different types of studies, data collection that could take place. So I just wanted to give that overview before we go straight into the main emphasis. So there are features of quantitative research I would like us to take note of. When you talk about quantitative research, is that type of research where there is more of objectivity than subjectivity. Is objectively deduced. You even see maybe in the, Dr. Dave will tell me that you have positivist view, you have different school of thoughts. Okay, so it's presented in numbers, and you use various methods, like Dr. Sibanda was trying to explain, to analyze the hypothesis, to really know whether you would actually accept or not accept. I do know some statisticians will tell you that you don't reject a hypothesis, rather you can say you do not accept that hypothesis. So you use quantitative means, statistical measures, and designs to check whether your hypothesis is to be accepted or not. Okay, and in quantitative design, there is actually very limited bias that could be introduced. There is bias, but it is more limited, and flexibility is also limited. However, if you recall the busy slide you saw, it was talking about sample size. In quantitative research, and which actually gravitates to data collection, large numbers are usually expected, large numbers relative to what is the case in qualitative research. Because in qualitative research, for instance, if you're using, let's say, the focus group data collection methods or interview, you might see that probably at 6 to 9, I'm not sure if I should be saying this when Dr. Nevashin, there is a qualitative expert, Dr. Morton are here, but I do know they have taught us that by the time you get to a certain number, still within that range, you start getting data saturation and you may not need to continue. But in most cases, in quantitative data, you will see that you need up to 300 participants and all that, depending on a lot of factors. Your prevalence rate and even the p-value could determine that. But the truth is that it's much more larger compared to the qualitative study. And again, in quantitative data or quantitative research or design, you would actually need to be sure that your validity and reliability are in place. There are various measures, to ensure that those factors are really put in place. You need to check your content validity, what you have, is it actually going to give you exactly what you want to deduce, your phase validity and all that. And you also need to ensure reliability. if this is repeated, you know, would I actually get the same thing if I apply and use the same method? And I usually tell my students, you know, don't say no, it's a miracle. I know, I believe in God, and I know that God can do miracles. I truly believe in that. But for research, you need to show beyond reasonable doubt that when another person repeats it, the person will get that same or similar result. You don't need to say, no, it's just peculiar to me. Nobody will believe you on that. So please, it's important that we attend to reproducibility. That is the essence. Your data should be, you know, your findings should be reproducible. And that is the essence of asking us to provide details of what we've done. If, you know, I do know the first time I tried, you know, doing muffins, following the recipe, you know, on that pack, you see, you will get the results because it is reproducible. But if they have omitted the quantity of water you need to put, the oil, and they just said add water, add oil, we'll all come up with different things. At times they may not look like muffin, they may look like pancake. So it's actually important that we provide details of what we have done. So having said that, why quantitative data collection? Why quantitative data collection? We strive to be objective as much as possible, and that is attainable via this platform of quantitative data collection. And like we mentioned before, you just have to be sure that your figures are counted, your parameters are measured, those attributes. You know, it's a way of quantifying them. You measure them, the behavior. You find a way of measuring them, and that is why you have the aspect of non-experimental research. Although you're not involved in the laboratory, you know, visiting mice, doing your ward round like Dr. Ntokozo did during her PhD, but you could as well ask questions on knowledge, attitude, perceptions that you could quantify. You could now bring out the objectivity in it, okay? And if you are also talking about why do we use quantitative data collection methods, is actually geared towards helping us know whether that hypothesis should be accepted or not accepted. Okay, so if you look through here, you would obviously see that we have the data collection tools by my left and the quantitative data collection methods by the right. This is not exhaustive in any way because they could actually be extrapolated, you know, in other ways. But just briefly to mention that we could, you know, using the probability sampling, get all the, you know, sampling methods. We use systematic, you can do stratified, a lot of them. You can use all that to collect your data, you know, and you can also use interview methods. I've mentioned focus group discussion for qualitative research, but you can actually do interviews that you could have. Even during COVID, we used a lot of that. Many people had to convert, you know, from what they already planned to interview methods, telephonically collecting data because you could not meet with your participants. So we could do that as well. You know, questionnaires can also be completed using the interview method and all that. And you can see the tools that we could also use via emails and all that. So the data collection has various, you know, angles via which you can actually use to collect your data. But as much as there are varied ways and methods you could use, the attendant consequences or challenges are varied. It also means that the challenge you will have while using online may not be the challenge you will have while using the mail option. And that also will differ from the challenge you will have using face-to-face. For instance, if I ask us here on the platform, if you use face-to-face, what will be the challenge? You will see that you actually need to also figure out, and the ethics application form has details on that. How will your participants get to the venue? What about if you're asking sensitive questions? How do you deal with that? Okay, what about the issue of power relations? A lot of things will come online. And if you're talking about using telephonic, you know, you need to also ensure that the person answering your phone is the person you want to interview. You need to also ensure that there is data made available and all that and all that. Also, there could be interruptions. For instance, if there's load shedding and probably you're using, it could actually affect it. So there are a few things you need to consider. The mail option, it has its own attendant consequences. So without this, some really, and really not exhaustive, there are a few challenges we have pointed out just to give you an idea. Data quality issues, finding relevant data, deciding on what data to collect. How do I deal with big data? These are challenges, researchers, depending on the scope of your study and level of experience that you face while doing data collection in the quantitative design. So low response rates. Remember we mentioned that usually large sample sizes are expected. And those are things that you need to really compare with what you want to get, what you need to get, and what has been there already. So I'll take them one after the other. Data quality issues. When you're talking about data quality issues, you will realize that, at times you may have, let's say you have 50 individuals, or probably you want to collect the data of how maybe nurses are being paid in the Nelson Mandela Bay, their salary levels and all that. And now you collected your data, say from 150 participants, and probably the field worker or the researcher, the PI, entering the data may also realize that whereas some people are paid 30,000 or 50,000 or 100,000, there's this figure here that is like 250,000, that is a huge outlier. That is also a concern. And you start wondering, is it that you made a mistake, or is it that, it's really what it is? Then you also notice that there is a situation where you will have what they call data lake. Huge data. One of a group of students were to work on secondary data. It was so much from the database of the Water Research Commission. It was so huge. They didn't know where to start from. So you need to start telling yourself, just like you do in systematic research, what should I use as my inclusion criteria? How can maybe I could say, okay, I'm going to use the info from this date to this date. So you have things that will guide you in selecting the years you will use. So we started from saying, okay, let's use these water bodies from these years, and it kind of trimmed it down. So when you see such huge data, don't think you will have to use everything. You need to make sure that you have a good plan on what to do. And that brings us to profiling, because when companies profile their data, when they clean it, remove the unnecessary outliers or errors, then it becomes usable. So it's very important that we do that. At times, you also notice that researchers might be coding their data, and you have codes 1, 2, 3, 4, as the case might be. And now when you're going through, you see codes like 110 that has no description. So you need to go through and ensure that you clean it. You can trace it back. And that is why it's important to ensure that you identify your participants. Even if it's anonymous, make sure you identify so that if you have any challenge, you can trace back and be able to solve that. Okay, so finding relevant data is very important. Finding relevant data. And we have what is called data curation. Actually, you need to create, organize, maintain your data in such a way that there is consistency, and someone looking at it will see the flow. And if organizations do that, it helps researchers when they go, they see, oh, there is systematic flow, and I can connect, these dots and use this in my study. So it's very important that we use these methods too. I know recently the university also have been encouraging data management and all that, so that we can actually make sure that we have our data well curated. So data cataloging is also very important, just like when you want to, if you go to maybe hairstylists or even your dress designers and all that, you want to see the catalog because it's well arranged and all that. So in also quantitative design, for you to collect data properly, it's important that you check the catalog, and for it to be cataloged, it means that someone or the company or the institution would have taken time to organize the inventory. Okay, deciding what data to collect. What data do I need to collect? It's not necessary to collect data that is not necessary. It's not relevant to collect irrelevant data. You know, data might be good or relevant for another person, but for your objective, for your study aim, is not necessary. So it's important we check actually the data you need by going through your objective, ensuring that you are in alignment with your objective, answering your research questions. Okay, because collecting data, at the end of the day, you come to your supervisor and they say, no, this is not right, and this is not, and you have wasted, you know, not only the participants' effort, all your money, time, many things is really disheartening. So it's important that we ensure that we collect the data that we need so that you don't end up wasting the resources that are not there in the first place. Okay, so on the other hand, if you need some information just to ensure that you're like in your questionnaire and you feel, oh no, I just want to have 5 questions. And then that 5 questions you have in your questionnaire is not addressing your objectives. Then you're excluding things you should not exclude. So we should ensure that when we look at if you're using questionnaire or your interview schedule, ensure that it's holistically addressing what you need to discover via your objectives and research questions. It's very important. Not too much, but not too little. And again, it can be informed by the scope of your study. For instance, if you're doing a final undergraduate study and you need to write a proposal and all that, it will not be as much as for a PhD. So that could also guide you on how much you need to use. So another challenge is dealing with big data. Okay, so yes, you have this big data, you have this, information, you have the pool and all that. So you need to structure it and you need to strategize. And you need to do what is called filtering. You need to filter, what do I need, what do I not need? And before you could filter appropriately, you need to have some guidance like your exclusion and inclusion criteria. Low response rate. This is an issue that, we battle with a lot. See students that for maybe 2, especially during the COVID, you have students that for 2 years we are unable to collect even up to 50 responses, completed questionnaires, and it was an issue. So low response rate is usually laden in such, data collections when you have to use questionnaires or email it or whatever approach you're using. So it's a huge challenge. And how do you deal with that? So if you need, because if you check the ethics application form, you will see minimum, maximum. So if you need 100, let's say, respondents or participants, for argument's sake, so you don't just say, okay, I'm going to collect 100. So you prepare or you kind of recruit 100. No, recruit that maximum so that by the end of the day, if they drop, at least they would have dropped to your minimum. So do not recruit 100 when you need 100 participants. You can actually expand the cost and enroll, and then you see how much that could actually come out to. And if you look at challenge of training data collectors, field workers, is really another heinous task, because you need to ensure that they are trained good enough to to represent you, put it that way, because you are the researcher and you want to ensure that your data is valid. So for it to be valid, you need to train those field workers or data collectors to do the job rightly. So training them is very important, and you need to consider approaches to have an effective and efficient training. Okay, so quality assurance is very important. Quality assurance, because if they collect the data, it's unethical as well to waste the time of your participants and then the data will not be used. So it's important to ensure that the data is collected in such a way that you can use it. And for you to use it, it means that you need to ensure that the quality is assured. Okay, so other issues include data contamination. How do we mean? I know it's not a microbial infection, or anything that you can be afraid of to wear your mask. No, but if, for instance, you're doing experimental research and you have the control group, the experimental group, the test group, and what you meant to give to the test group was given to the control group. That is contamination, is data contamination. Because when you're receiving the, let's say you want to measure those that took paracetamol, those that took Panadol, those that took just water, and you swapped it, you'll be taking a different reading, maybe attributing, therapeutic effectiveness to something that was not in the first place meant to have been there. So that is really a problem that we need to avoid. And if you're also doing a questionnaire, you want to find out how the response rate or the interest of people in this class and the other class, you need to make sure that that class do not get are not privy of the details, this class, the responses and all that. Because if they know, by the time you get there, it's like they're repeating what this one said. So somehow you need to just ensure that the data is not contaminated. Power relations, is also something we need to watch out for, especially when you're doing data collection, using questionnaires, research tools, or even the experimental. So if you are doing a data collection and you're requesting your employee to complete a form for you, and the employee knows the right thing to say, but is really a bit scared that if I say it, you'll be, so that is also a problem in data collection. So you need to ensure, and that is why it's in the ethics application form, you need to ensure that, such you have measures in place to avert that or to ensure that it's minimized. Okay, we've spoken about sample size earlier, and this is a challenge that we need to circumvent. So tips in quantitative data collection. What are the tips? Collect the right data to meet the research needs. And the way to collect the right data is what Dr. Sibenda was trying to explain to us. And like I said, we are going to have expanded sessions on those so that we know exactly how to collect data. Someone that is doing an evaluation or assessing prevalence, we need to calculate that data in a different way. So we all need to have details on that. So ensure that your data is accurate and collected in the right way. Okay, and don't waste time or resources collecting irrelevant data. So you need to please plan properly. Plan properly. Okay, so if you look at this, it's still partly what we have mentioned, but some really identify research issues to be addressed, the need to address. What is the problem? I think even in the problem statement, you could factor that in. Set the goals for the project and what are the requirements. Think about what you need, to achieve those objectives. Gather the information that you need, and gather the relevant ones. Like we said, there are many, that you can see out there, but your objective will guide you to what you need.
Paula,
don't collect everything you have seen there. Thank you so much. So don't collect everything you have seen there, but ensure that you are collecting the right data. And before you analyze, please, it's important so that your content validity will be maintained. You need to prep it. You need to clean up. You need to look at your data. There are some, errors that may have been erroneously committed. So you just need to really check it and make sure that you have finalized that. So thank you so much for your time. I leave the last 3 or 4 minutes for questions, comments, contributions.
Thank you very much, Prof. Paula, for that insightful presentation. I see Prof. Dr. Sibanda's hand is up. Mwilbert, you want to ask a question? Dr. Sibanda, your hand is up. Do you want to say something?
Yes, can you hear me now, Sean?
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you clearly. I'm sure the others can. Go ahead.
Thanks, Prof. Paula. Brilliant presentation there. Just a few things, ma'am, I want to mention on the study design. You hinted on that, and the data collection. What I see is oftentimes students coming back from your reviews, your ethical committees and things like that with issues that pertain to the design. And it's almost like putting the horse, the cart before the horse, or the other way around. But so it becomes very difficult then to help them at that point, because most of them are almost losing hope in what they are doing. And I have cases like that going on at the moment. If we can emphasize more aspect of experimental design, looking strictly into the design itself, the fundamentals of the design in terms of the output variables, the input variables, and the experimental process itself. I'm talking about the blueprint of the experiment, way before the student starts collecting data. I think we'll circumvent that problem there. In other universities, Prof. Paula, I won't be ashamed to mention KZN here. It's almost a standard that students pass through a screening process where the data, the experiment itself has been reviewed. The design has been strictly reviewed prior to anything being done. I'm not talking about ethical issues and all, but statistician or the supervisor in conjunction with the statistician must look into the design of the study of the student prior to data collection. I think that's what I'm dealing with now, Prof. If we can emphasize that. And again, on the sample size you mentioned, sample size is a big thing, because if you get it wrong, you probably have a lower power of the study, isn't it? Or you have underpowered your study. And if you have overpowered it, then for what purposes? So sample size is also fundamental, but also sample size, as we calculate it from the two approaches I outlined, is meant to give you the minimum number that you can collect for your study. Therefore, it's often important to pad it. We call that padding it by 15%. So you could then say my sample size from a robust analytical process that used to calculate that sample size at 15% to take care of those that might drop out of your study, so that you fall back to the sample size. Just a few things that I wanted to mention, but I appreciate the presentation. I learned something. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sibanda. I was just laughing because you're very brilliant, and you really want to pour out all that you have to pour out, and you wanted to steal 2 of my minutes to still talk about some of the things in your slide. So thank you so much for that smart idea. But I'm happy that the subcommittee members of the FPGSC are here, and we've noted really the comments you made. And I think considering that we are busy generating criteria for certain things, I'm sure that asking our students, like our statistician has mentioned, and is done in UKZN, to give a proof that they have received verification from a statistical consultant while submitting their proposal will not be a bad idea. So thank you so much for highlighting that. Yeah, I don't know if there is any other question.
Yeah. Just to the members again and other students, any further questions, points of clarification, also from staff members? Okay, Prof. Paula, I don't see any comments on the meeting chat box and further questions. What I just want to mention, perhaps from my side, because I've seen most of the slides that were presented, they've actually got a wealth of information, and they're actually going to be of immense value to the students. So perhaps if we can get all the slides from all the presenters and perhaps put them into one sort of document and make that available to the students, I think that's going to be of great value to them, just from my side. Okay, in terms of the session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sean. And just to respond to that, the directorates, they're busy actually trying to devise a means of communicating our presenters at the end of the day. So as many as give us the permission to use the slides, as we would want to share that, we will definitely share that. Is in our minds, and we are on that. And just to say the last, we can indeed change the world. So let's start now to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.